I go by the name Ruby, a 26-year-old single woman without a full-time job. Since my middle school years, I've tended to keep to myself quite a bit. I went to high school but dropped out, so I only have a middle school education. Since then, I've been living with my parents, working part-time jobs, and taking on work from online postings. I have an older brother named James, who's 3 years older than me. He's the complete opposite of me, good at sports, with lots of friends, and the so-called outgoing type. My brother didn't want people to know he had a sister like me. He never brought friends home, and even if I happened to run into him and his friends at the convenience store, he'd ignore me. I thought it couldn't be helped and considered it someone else's problem. Once my brother started college and moved out to live on his own, I stopped worrying about such things. Then there was talk of my brother getting married. He would be turning 29, so it wasn't surprising. Later, it was decided that my brother would bring his fiancée to our parents' house. Since I was home that day, I decided to join them. "Dad, Mom, I'm home," I announced as my brother arrived on time. When he saw me sitting with our parents, he looked confused for a moment. "Sorry to intrude," his fiancée said as she entered the house, seemingly unaware of my brother's attitude. Then looking at me, she said, "Hey, chill," and looked puzzled. I could tell from her eyes that she was asking my brother, "Who is this?" He probably hadn't told her about me. "Thank you for coming all this way. I'm James's mother, and this is his father." My mother introduced only herself and my father. The fiancé seemed satisfied, bowed politely, but still looked puzzled. My father didn't follow up on my behalf. My parents have always been harsh with me, the daughter who couldn't live up to my accomplished brother. When we were young, they'd say things like, "Your brother can do it. Why can't you?" As if it was part of my education. But it changed as we grew older. Eventually, I was even called a money-sucking leech. It seemed that my parents were planning to ignore me at this meeting too. "I'll go and get some more drinks," my mother said as she stood up to leave. She whispered in my ear, "Why are you here? Go back to your room." I had attended this meeting because I wanted to get along with my family in my own way, but it seemed to have backfired. Still, I couldn't just leave, so I stayed put. My brother's fiancée introduced herself as Emma. She was the same age as me minus 26, but a beautiful woman with a refined atmosphere, giving off a vibe that I shouldn't casually talk to her. My brother seemed a bit annoyed. He probably didn't like me being there. He introduced Emma to our father and mother, but didn't talk to me at all. It felt like I was a ghost. When the conversation about the marriage was over, casual chatter naturally started, but my brother still acted like I didn't exist. Then James asked, "What do you usually do, Ruby?" Before I could answer, my brother interrupted, "Wait, Emma, you don't need to talk to her." That's what he said, clearly. Emma looked a bit surprised. "That's right, don't worry about it," my mother chimed in. "Yeah, don't worry about it. She's just a stranger with a blood relation," my father added. When my father said that, something inside me ended. A stranger, huh? I thought. Reconciliation was impossible from the start. That's how the meeting ended, as if it didn't matter whether I was there or not. Soon after, my brother and Emma got married and started building a house to live in together. My brother works at a famous company after graduating from college. He's still in his 20s, but his income seems good. Emma is going to be a stay-at-home wife and has already quit her job. Around the time my brother's house was completed, we received an invitation to a housewarming party. It would be held with a limited number of guests, including Emma's relatives and my brother's bosses. My mother was anxious, saying, "Oh, it's already finished." Time flies. We need to prepare a housewarming gift. What should we get? My father said, We're family, so it doesn't have to be anything fancy. And he casually turned over the invitation. Only my father's and mother's names were on the invitation. My name wasn't there. My mother seemed to have noticed but asked, "Ruby is coming too, right?" I wondered what she meant. At the meeting, they had introduced me in such a horrible way. "It's fine if I'm not invited." I declined, but my mother insisted, "No, you're coming. I'll make arrangements." So I ended up going to the party. On the day of the party, it suddenly started raining. My parents and I took a taxi to my brother's house. My brother and his wife didn't come out to the front yard because of the rain to welcome their guests. Instead, they stayed at the entrance. As soon as we arrived at my brother's house, my mother said to me, "You paid for the taxi," and got out of the car with my father first. Without umbrellas, they both hurried toward the entrance. I thought to myself, so that's why. There was quite a distance between my brother's house and ours, so it felt extravagant to take a taxi. Yet I was the one left to pay for it. After I paid, I ran toward the entrance. Emma, standing there, asked me, "Who are you?" I had only met Emma once before, so I thought maybe she forgot me. I introduced myself. "I'm Ruby, James's sister." But she said with a smile, "Ah, the high school dropout." Neat. We didn't invite the parasite living off her parents. Emma said this casually, still smiling. My brother, who had just returned from showing someone in, came out too. He looked at me with disdain and said, "Huh, why are you here?" "Hey, James, I told you not to invite her." "Why is she here?" "Well, I don't know either," he replied dismissively. It was clear my brother didn't want to invite me after all, and Emma's attitude turned even worse once she realized who I was. Actually, she seemed worse than my brother and parents combined. "Would it have been better if I didn't come?" I asked my brother cautiously. "Yeah, you're a stranger," he replied, "because of your low education." Actually, not finishing high school doesn't even count as education, right? "Could you please leave the property quickly?" Emma followed up, siding with him, her expression calm and unnerving. "Understood," I said and turned on my heel. The taxi from earlier was gone, and since we weren't on a main street, it seemed difficult to find another one. Without an umbrella, I trudged along, getting drenched in the rain. Behind me, I could hear Emma's laughter. After a while, I returned home. My parents came back later, looking like they had a good time. They saw my face and asked, "Why did you leave suddenly?" "Couldn't even call a taxi for the way back." "You're so useless," my mother complained, as if it were nothing. "Sorry, I suddenly had a stomachache. I lied to cover it up." "For such a reason, you left on your own. You're hopeless. Make sure to give the gift later." "You're an adult," my father said. Speaking of which, I had prepared something to give at the party, but brought it back with me. I thought of sending it by mail, but I didn't know the address. I could have asked my parents, but the atmosphere was awkward. So I decided to contact my brother directly. "I want to send a gift. Can you tell me the address?" I texted. This was his only reply. "I don't give my address to strangers." I let out a sigh. Is it really fun to assert dominance over me in private, not just in public? I thought. I couldn't help but be amazed. It might not even be my brother sending these messages. Maybe Emma was typing them while laughing out loud. Either way, it was ridiculous. I gave up on sending a congratulatory gift. With the meaning of my brother and his wife's housewarming party long gone, I decided to leave home. I realized I couldn't get along with my family anymore and chose to live on my own. I didn't have a full-time job, but I had savings from my part-time work. I was able to rent a room to live alone. Since it wasn't much to live on, I decided to try streaming videos in my spare time. I had already been interested in watching streams as a hobby and was good at identifying trends among popular streamers and ways to increase views. When I started doing it myself, I made tens of thousands a month. The amount grew, covering my living expenses. I decided to invest the money I wasn't using. The investments went well, and I eventually started a small company importing and selling goods. I was busy in a good way and felt fulfilled every day. I no longer had a family complaining about me spending time on the computer. A few months later, I received a call from my parents, who hadn't contacted me since I left home. "We want you to help James financially," they said. "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. I wondered what could have happened to the person who just built a new house. My parents slowly began to explain this situation my brother apparently held frequent parties after building his new house, interacting with various people, such as bosses, executives, clients, and Emma's acquaintances. Among them, someone proposed an investment opportunity, and my brother ended up trusting the proposal. He wasted a large sum of money, lured by the promise of making big returns in just a few months. I was amazed. My brother had a decent job, so if he had just kept working hard, he wouldn't have made such a mistake. "Who is the person who recommended the investment? Isn't it a scam?" I asked. "No, it's not. It's one of Emma's acquaintances." My parents seemed to completely trust Emma. "How much do you need?" She was shocked when I asked. It was an amount that a company employee couldn't easily pay. "Is that really the amount my brother needs alone?" I asked. My parents hesitantly, and as expected, they gave me the answer I feared. "We were also introduced to the same investment." My parents hesitated before responding. "I can't come up with that much money so easily." "Sorry." I tried to hang up the phone, but they clung on, saying, "We're your real family. Help us out in times like these." Real family. Too little, too late. "Sorry, but I'm busy, and I'm a stranger to you." Right with that, I hung up the phone. Later on, somehow they found out, and my parents and brother's families showed up. The location was the office of the company I run. I was in a business meeting at the time. My secretary informed me, "There are guests here for you, President." "I don't have any other appointments." "Who are they?" I shuddered. I apologized to the business partner I was meeting with and excused myself for a moment. When I went to the reception area, there stood my pregnant sister-in-law, Emma, my brother, and my parents. "You're running a company, huh?" "Well, it's much smaller than where I work." My brother smirked and looked around the office. "Who are you?" I asked, pretending I didn't know them. "What's with the attitude?" my brother shouted, losing his temper. My mother intervened and explained, "We talked about this before, but we need your support. You're running a company, so you can help us out, right?" My mother shamelessly asked for money as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Yeah, it's an important time for our family. Emma is about to give birth. The child's growth isn't good, so we need to see a good doctor. Please, Ruby." My father and Emma chimed in, acting as if it was my duty to pay off everyone's debts. Employees occasionally walked by the reception area, glancing over with concern, wanting to get rid of them as quickly as possible. I said, "Please leave. You're causing a disturbance." My brother exploded with anger again. "What? We're a disturbance? We came all the way here, and that's how you talk to your family?" he yelled. The employees passing by stopped in their tracks, facing them. My brother started to make a scene. "Do you all know this girl dropped out of middle school? She was a shut in no need." He seemed intent on humiliating me if I didn't give him the money. However, the employees responded with words my brother didn't expect. "We know everyone knows the president's background." "Me too. The president hires many people from similar situations." "Is there a problem?" My brother, who usually socializes only with highly educated and high-income people, seemed caught off guard and stammered. Instead, my father said, "What a pathetic company, just a gathering of." Needs my brother chimed in, "Exactly companies that do business. Business with a place like this can't be any good either," he yelled. Loudly at that moment, the president of the company I was meeting with, who had been waiting in the reception room, came out. He must have heard this shouting. My brother's face went blank, and then turned pale as he looked at the man. He lowered his gaze. "What's wrong?" "James," Emma asked my brother. "Idiot, don't say my name," my brother whispered to Emma. But it was too late. James owed. "It's you." The company president walked straight up to my brother and looked at his face. "You're the guy who always falls." "Mr. Long, the division manager, right? We owe a lot to your company." His company was also a client of my brother's company. My brother was sweating profusely from every pore on his face. That's how I guess I'm not memorable, since we're not a day-in company." When the president threw my brother's words back at him, my brother went and froze up. My father, mother, and Emma also sensed the trouble and fell silent. I apologized to the president again, ignoring them. "I'm sorry for taking up your valuable time. I'll ask them to leave," I said. The company president looked at me with mild concern. "Are you sure? I have time today, so if you need to prioritize talking with your family, I don't mind waiting." "They're not my family," I replied without hesitation, glancing at my parents' and brother's family. "They're complete strangers." My words hung in the air, heavy and final. Perhaps stunned by the exchange, my parents, brother, and his family left quietly, escorted out of the building. Later, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate how they had learned about my job. Unsurprisingly, Emma was the cause. Emma had a friend who was well informed about investments and always kept an eye on up-and-coming businesses. This friend had come across a young woman in her 20s, making waves as a successful trader and company owner. When Emma saw a photo in the media, she was shocked to realize that the woman was me, her husband's sister, who she had been told was a middle school dropout and a shut-in. Emma immediately told my brother and parents, suggesting they ask me for money. When I didn't answer their calls or call them back, they took it upon themselves to show up at my office. After treating them as strangers, I thought I was finally free of them, but something didn't sit right with me. I decided to dig a little deeper into Emma's role in my family's financial troubles. It turned out Emma's investment-savvy friend was actually her ex-boyfriend. Worse, they were still involved. As I continued looking into the situation, I uncovered an even more devastating truth. The child Emma was carrying wasn't my brother's, but her ex-boyfriend's. When my brother learned the truth, he was devastated. It was understandable. His marriage, his trust, and his financial stability had all been a lie. Emma's deceit didn't stop there. Under her ex-boyfriend's guidance, she had been extracting money from multiple men, using lies and manipulation to fund their schemes. Eventually, the police caught up with them. Emma and her ex-boyfriend were arrested, but the money they stole is unlikely to be recovered anytime soon. The fallout was massive. After the incident at my company, my brother's standing at his workplace plummeted. He was demoted to a dead-end position and, unable to cope, resigned shortly afterward. My father didn't fare much better. His fiery temper and demeaning attitude towards subordinates caught up with him. One day, the company president witnessed him berating a subcontractor. When the president investigated further, it came to light that my father had been making disparaging comments about employees' educational backgrounds, saying things like, "If you didn't graduate from a top university, you're not even a real person." The same toxic mindset he had used to belittle me ended up costing him his job. With both my brother and father unemployed, the family, if you could still call them that, found themselves in dire financial straits. Despite everything, they continued to contact me, pleading, "Let's live together." I wasn't about to let them worm their way back into my life. I had them banned from entering my company's building, cutting off any chance of them forcing their way in again. Even now, they try various tactics to cling to me, but my response remains unchanged. "I don't know you. You're complete strangers to me." No matter what they say or do, that will always be my answer.